Hello and welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. I'm Avan Dabash, and I will be taking you on a journey into the future. Many of us know that blockchain is a topic that's hot at the moment. It's a topic that's disruptive. It's a topic that's accelerating. But what exactly is blockchain? This 26-part series of Blockchain Startup Show is our attempt to explain in detail, but in simple words, the intent and components behind blockchain technology and share examples of where this technology is being used. Let's start with the basics. What is blockchain? Well, if you take the word quite literally, it's a chain that connects blocks containing something. Now, what is that something? This something is the data. This data can be anything: your previous order from a food delivery app, hospital records, or even property records. At its core, the blockchain can be thought of as a shared database populated with entries that have been verified and encrypted. Imagine that you enter some data. This data is encrypted and stored in a block. Imagine a lot of data being stored in a cardboard box, if you will. Once full, this block is connected by a chain to the next block. Now, all of this is stored not just on one computer or one server, but multiple ones, so that if someone tries to change the data in one of the older blocks, it won't tally with the other copies, thus raising an alarm that something is amiss. This also means that the blockchain is immutable, a big word for saying that once data is entered, it can't be altered. One last bit about blockchain. Because blockchain does not have a single owner or controller, and instead a group of people have control of the data, it's called decentralized. So I hope that helped you get some context about blockchain. On each episode of this series, we will explore blockchain in more depth and the many elements of this revolutionary technology. Now let's focus on the topic of this episode. Decentralized finance, or DeFi, were initially the most popular cases of public blockchains. They are what made blockchain cool and put it in the spotlight. FYI, DeFi is actually an umbrella term for peer-to-peer financial services on public blockchains, primarily like Ethereum. Now, one might question, what exactly is Ethereum? Let's delve deeper. Ethereum is actually considered by many to be the second most popular cryptocurrency after Bitcoin. Not only that, it helps in the creation of smart contracts and decentralized applications, also known as dApps. Well, in short, Ethereum gives you the platform on which you can build the dApps using its technology, the architecture, and the software. But there's one more element related to Ethereum that's very interesting: NFTs. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are nothing but a bunch of unique tokens that exist on one blockchain and cannot be replicated. So that means if you have an NFT token, I cannot have the same token, hence maintaining complete individuality of it. NFTs can represent any form of a digital file, whether that's a piece of art, a video, or even real estate, thus allowing creators of digital content to get more money for a creation that would be one of a kind. NFTs are designed for digital files to be secured in a way that ensures ownership and creates scarcity. And just like Bitcoin or Ethereum, NFT clearly represents it can neither be replaced nor interchanged because of its unique properties. NFTs have sure taken the world by storm with the financial opportunities that they provided for artists and creators. But since the last crypto bull run, most NFTs have struggled to preserve their value, and their promise of alleviating the creators' problems has remained largely unmet. However, the tokenization of non-fungible properties of anything in the world holds great promise for the future. Use cases like tokenizing credentials, deeds, and so many other day-to-day things are possible with this powerful technology. So what next? Well, to answer this, we've got the head of NFTs at Protocol Labs, Jonathan Victor, with us to talk more about NFTs and their very unique features. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to the show. Let me start off by asking whether or not NFTs are a fad or a bubble, or is there something really here?
NFTs are just a standard for what I like to think of as digital bearer objects. I think what we've seen people do with them today may not be the limit of what we see with people doing them tomorrow. I don't think that discounts some of the use cases we see today. So I think I'm pretty bullish that the idea of tokenizing digital art, having digital game objects, these are things that are going to stick around. But I think we're also probably going to see quite a number more of applications that use this digital bearer object just to allow users to bring assets around the web. So whether that's things like user preferences that are NFTs, that when you go to a new website, rather than using cookies or something else, we have a digital standard where users are bringing their preferences into websites, whether that's things like tickets. So instead of having to go through individual platforms, just having something anyone can plug into, I think we're going to see more and more innovation. And so I think while it's reasonable to look at maybe the last year or last 2 years as sort of being a lot of enthusiasm and potentially over enthusiasm, I think we can look at the fundamentals of the technology and be excited about the fact that we are bringing a new property into the web where users are able to actually bring data around with them rather than having platforms themselves collect data and have it be trapped in individual silos.
Jonathan, should the average creator still care about NFTs?
I think if you're a creator, it really should depend on what you're trying to create. When we think about paper, we don't think of art being specifically linked or important because it's on a specific type of paper. I would also think of NFTs in that way. NFTs are just a medium, and they have specific properties that I think are unique to them. They have composability with anyone else who's building applications that know how to interpret NFTs. And so I think that can make them more powerful and more useful in a bunch of ways. So if a user is building their own gallery, there is now a ton of tools that are available that make it possible for them to bring in the NFTs that they've bought. So I think by making your art or your creations NFTs, you're giving your users more composability and more power over them. I think as we see more and more tools that are built and more infrastructure around NFTs, we'll see more and more value propositions for end users where they will be more interested in having things that are NFTs just because it's more useful in more contexts.
Well, having said that, how important, according to you, is the Metaverse movement for the future of NFTs? And how do you view Facebook's, or Meta now as it's known as, $70 billion experiment?
I think the metaverse in general, I know there's sort of the canonical view of sort of the digital world overall. I think if you were to take a slightly different frame, we already sort of live in a metaverse. We spend so much of our lives online. And I think it's maybe more important to ask the question, what are the rights that we as users want to have inside of the digital world? So even today, we sort of accepted that the web is sort of this client server model where end users are sort of at the best of the platforms that they're working on top of. And I think blockchains in general, NFTs in the specific, give us this notion of property rights. And I think thinking of the digital world as not just this external thing that we sometimes dip in and out of, as we see more and more blending between the physical world and the digital world, they both are places that we spend time. And I think blockchains and NFTs in general just give us the ability to bring in some of the property rights and the things that people might expect, but into the digital space. Overall, I'm actually kind of heartened that Facebook is willing to put so much money behind this experiment. Granted, a lot of the work that they're doing is on the hardware side. Granted, also as sort of a centralized company, I think there might not be as much of a bias towards open source. But I do think it validates sort of what a lot of other people in this space believe. And I think that also should then be exciting if Facebook is willing to put $70 billion behind building a private version of this thing. Should we not want to create the public and open version that anyone can tap into as a public commons where users are more in control of their own assets?
What is the Protocol Labs NFT strategy exactly?
We work on a bunch of open source technologies. The two main ones that are sort of relevant for NFTs are IPFS and Filecoin. So IPFS is a protocol that, unlike HTTP, it allows you to reference content based on a fingerprint of that content. So to sort of make it maybe a little clearer why that matters. With an NFT, your asset may not actually be stored on a blockchain directly, usually because it's very expensive to do so. So usually what they'll do instead is they'll have a link to where the metadata, so the image, the video, whatever your NFT is, they'll have a link that links out to where that content might be hosted. So IPFS gives you a really powerful way of saying, regardless of where this content lives, this is the fingerprint of that content, and that is the thing that the NFT is actually referencing. The other side of it is if you have this canonical reference, you need another way of saying, how do I make sure this data is held somewhere? And that's where Filecoin, as a decentralized storage network, uses cryptography and economics to make sure that you have a minimum number of copies on the network at all times. So when we think about our NFT strategy, it's really looking at, well, how do we solve the problems that users natively care about without having to make it front and center for them? So if a user wants to have a really large file, they shouldn't care how is the content addressed, where is it stored. They should just be able to throw the data into these decentralized networks and have it work. If you want an NFT that can change over time, we still want to retain that provenance and that verifiability property, but we want to make sure that that also is done in like the right cryptographically verifiable way, so you don't lose the value props of the NFTs. And so when we think about our NFT strategy, it's very much focused on how do we allow people to do the things that they want to do, but do it in the way that gives them sort of the verifiability properties that make NFTs actually valuable and interesting.
I just want to understand, what are some of the interesting NFT use cases Protocol Labs is seeing in today's day and age?
One of the interesting base cases that I think we see quite frequently is just game objects. I think the thing that's interesting is games that are trying to give incentives for other games to implement their NFTs. Another thing that maybe is not as obvious for folks is NFTs, again, they are just digital bearer objects. And so if you look even at Uniswap as like a decentralized exchange, each position of like, if you are an LP in Uniswap is an NFT itself. It's not an NFT in the way that we typically think of them. It's not being traded in the same way. But it's important to note that because it is an NFT, it's now composable with all of the other infrastructure people have built around NFTs. You could also squint at things like, even I know there's a couple of teams that are working on things like corporate bonds as NFTs, where when we think of NFTs, we sometimes think of like, oh, well, they have these traits and these properties. Some of them are shared with other things. And if you sort of squint at corporate bonds, a lot of them look very similar as well. And so I think it really is sort of like remixing these different ideas where, yes, they're being developed and the use cases and the frontier is being pushed in like specific verticals, but all of the tooling and the infrastructure can be reapplied for all of these diverse use cases that are completely maybe like separate from what people might have originally imagined.
And how do you see the NFT space evolving, Jonathan, in the future?
I think we're going to see sort of like a return to like, what are the things that are not just like the quick wins, but what are the things that are actually like long-term interesting and valuable? And so to me, I'm actually still quite bullish on the gaming side of things. I think there's a natural analogy between things like digital skins that people might buy in Fortnite and some of the other assets that you would buy normally in a game, but inside of a closed economy, and thinking more holistically about how blockchains and sort of NFTs and other tokens can allow us to create open economies that can be like less centrally closed off. So to me, I think that's like one of the most interesting early use cases. I am also interested in some of the more boring use cases for NFTs as well. I think things like proof of attendance protocol, so just little NFTs that show that you were at an event, or even just things that are like little buttons where if you watch a TV show, you can scan and get like an NFT to just signal that you're a part of community. To me, I think those are actually the more interesting use cases because they're so benign.
All right, that's pretty interesting, Jonathan. Thank you so much for those valuable insights. On that note, it's time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. We have a very interesting chat on the other side of this quick break. Welcome back to the Blockchain Startup Show. Now that we know about blockchain and NFTs, and we've heard the expert, it's time for us to introduce you to the star of our next segment, which we call Living in the Future. Let me introduce you to Ayush Ranjan, who's the co-founder and CEO at Huddle01, who has outdone himself with the use of the upcoming new technology. Ayush, welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. Let me begin by addressing the elephant in the room. Now, according to you, Web3, is it a trend or is it here to stay?
In Web3, what's exactly happening is that you decentralize the technology, that's good, but you're also decentralizing the value. And that's what is happening in a lot of cases. What I mean by this is that now the value is being distributed between people itself. Giving you simple examples of that would be various kind of infrastructures. I'll talk more about infrastructure because Huddle01 is an infrastructure itself, is that they're seeing a lot of infrastructures which are coming up, which essentially helps even people to essentially run their own infrastructure at their own home, which is called home servers itself. So when you do these kind of things, you're able to essentially use your own laptop, your own compute device, your own bandwidth, the geo Wi-Fi which you have at your home, all of these things, use it to empower any kind of architecture which is out there. So this is how our internet is working right now itself. It's completely changing on the flip of it, essentially, from completely moving from a client server architecture, which has been working, which has been like the whole crux of the Web2 world. We're moving to a different kind of world where now anywhere at their home can run their own computers and they can earn money from it at the end of the day. And that helps in a variety of aspects. The first is privacy itself. The second is performance. And the third is a new bottom-up economy, which is coming up itself. So I think that's one of the reasons why Web3 will be going much more into detail and much more into the hands of people itself. Yeah.
So can you describe your journey? Tell us a little bit more about how you got into Web3. What was that moment when you realized this is a big thing? It's the next big thing.
In terms of how I started, I'm an electrical engineer by my education itself. I did my engineering, graduated in 2016 from LNMIT Jaipur. And post that, I worked in a lot of growth-based companies in India itself, in Bangalore, specifically TaskBob and Zepho, which is similar to hyperlocal service like Urban Clap, and then worked in Zepho as well, which is in Bangalore, very similar to Amazon, but for all these used appliances and furnitures. But what essentially I realized, I was working more towards growth and marketing there. I used to use something called as Google AdWords a lot. Now, Google AdWords is used to show ads to people wherever they go, however they go. And I have that superpower to send people ads, show them ads, and get a good ROI out of it in terms of the startups I was working at. But I soon realized that the way we are showing these ads to people, there's no way to completely opt out of it. I cannot completely opt out of the Google Display Network itself. And when I was trying to do these customer interviews, I really like to talk to customers. I realized that, hey, your product is really good, guys, but could you please not show me the ads? And that's where I realized that could there be a better way to advertise while not tracking users and even users getting something out of it. And that's where in 2019, I stumbled upon Brave browser. It's exactly like Chrome. You can use it exactly. There's no kind of learning curve. But when you log into Brave, it's like magic. You get to see ads and you get basic attention token as a reward for it. So you're incentivized to see ads. So now your click-through rate has improved. You're having a better experience. You're not getting tracked, and it's a win-win for you. And that was like, hey, this new bottom-up economy is completely changing all the markets altogether. And that's how I completely jumped into the bandwagon of Web3 itself.
Let's understand a little bit more about Huddle01. How did it come into picture, and what are some of the ways in which Huddle is currently being used?
Absolutely. So Huddle01 is essentially building a real-time communication. What we are doing right now, a real-time communication engine itself. We have a three-pronged approach. We have an app exactly like Zoom. It's a sufficiently decentralized platform. Done more than 25,000 meetings, more than 600,000 minutes of the meetings which have been consumed on the platform itself. Messari is one of our biggest clients. Messari is one of the biggest names in the world of Web3 itself, and a couple of other NFT-based communities, DAOs, everyone uses it. You can do all the things you can do on Zoom, but you don't need to log in via your Google authentication. That means I don't take your data, I don't take your name, I don't take your email, nothing. You log in via something called as your own wallets, where you own your own data. You want to, and you share only your public address, whatever you want to share. That's one. Second is that you're able to use all these new primitives like NFTs as your avatars. That means if I don't want to switch on my video, I can switch off my video, I can use my NFT as my avatars. The second, where essentially now all the live stream also is done in a decentralized fashion. That means we use something called as live peer for doing a live stream directly onto YouTube itself in a decentralized fashion completely. The authentication is decentralized. The third is the recording. Now, all the recordings which are done so far itself, they are done on the cloud itself. That means on Amazon S3 or on Glacier. We said that, hey, hold on, let's try to do recording on a different architecture, which is decentralized in nature. So we are doing it on IPFS and Filecoin. IPFS is interplanetary file system, and Filecoin essentially a proper decentralized storage network itself. Now here, first of all, when you store here, it's cryptographically encrypted. That means I cannot see any of your recording itself. So that's number one. Second is that it's extremely cheap as compared to any of the other solutions which are out there.
I know for a fact that Huddle is built on Filecoin. So how is the experience? How is it different than building on, say, a centralized platform?
Absolutely. So Filecoin is a proper decentralized storage network itself. That means just taking an analogy of it, there is a reason why Oyo completely went into the market and completely took over the market from hotels. The reason was very simple, or even Airbnbs itself. So Airbnbs also took over the hotels because you can open Airbnbs right at your own home itself. So now if there are a lot of people, that means there's a lot of supply. That means you have a better economics itself. So the competition increases, the price goes down. So that is what is happening with Filecoin as well. There are so many miners. By miners, I mean there's so many people who can just use their hard disk, which is just sitting in their own home of 10 TB, and make them as a node itself. And you can store all the prices there. And then they'll say that, hey, I can do that in let's suppose 10 rupees itself, rather than paying 50 rupees to an Amazon AWS S3. So because of these competitions itself, your quality also increases because there's a better kind of quality check, but your also prices decreases over time. So essentially it's an Airbnb for storage as compared to hotels, which are the AWS S3 and Glaciers of today.
So Ayush, we spoke about Web3, Zoom, but what are some of the other apps or platforms that can be targeted? You think we can have, say, Web3 Netflix too? And if yes, how do you think that's going to be different?
Yeah, so I think the first change is happening on the YouTube level itself. I think there'll be more spiral down effects post that. So when you do like the live streaming onto YouTube itself, you can actually do the chats. You can do a super chat. You can send a sticker and stuff like that. But still, YouTube takes around 30 to 40% of that as well. Now, what's happening here is that people are building their own players itself, very similar to YouTube, just for the creator economy, where now you can directly tip your creator. If you like that creator itself, let's suppose Beer Biceps, you like it, you can directly tip Beer Biceps himself, and he takes all the value out of it. There is no middleman in terms of 40%, which YouTube takes. And this is what you can do even on Huddle01 right now. So that means you can just directly stream this call, because everywhere video conferencing is required. Just stream this call onto your own player itself. And there you can also do this tipping as well to people in future. And you get all that, all that money, which was actually being given away to the, was taken by the YouTube as well. So I think that's what is happening. And then over time, as you're mentioning, more kind of this will empower creators, and more of these indie kind of films will start coming up on these Web3 Netflix competitors itself. There's things like LensTube already happening, which is a competitor of YouTube on the Lens protocol, and a couple of more others. Very exciting times.
Well, Ayush, that was a great conversation, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And that brings us to a close on this very special episode of the Blockchain Startup Show. We'll see you next week with a discussion on other topics revolving around blockchain and with a new inspiring story. Till then, keep watching ET Now.